on January 15th at 6:15 p.m. Christina, you call the roll, please.
Clark. David. Fish. Here. Jorgensen. Here. Cole. Here. Parsons. Present. Mayor Lumberg.
Here. With that, I'd accept a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion second to approve the agenda is presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone wishing to address the public, or anyone from the public that wishing to address the council may do so at this time.
Totally a different position than I was in the last time I was in this room. For those of you who don't know me, Brett Bashan, 1705 Parkview Boulevard, Brandon, South Dakota. I happen to be one of the council members last year that approved the $50,000 stipend for 24-hour, 7 days a week ALS service to this community. I'm also responsible for some of the content within the ambulance ordinance that's proposed this evening. I do want to thank the mayor, the city council for serving our community, as well as MedStar and your ambulance staff, as well as Chief Weir and your staff, and Chief Dykstra and his staff. I think they're the police department, certainly the fire department, are the heart and soul of our EMS service, and you know, we're grateful to have all three of you in this building this evening. So I do want to just point out a couple key points. Number one, key point with this ordinance number 598 is that there have been no changes to the staffing requirements that have been followed by MedStar Ambulance Service since 2007 and the ordinance 6-7. The proposed ambulance ordinance number 598 was designed for the citizens of the Brandon and was not particularly designed for an ambulance vendor, and in my opinion is only as good as an enforcement. Again, as one of the past council members that did approve the $50,000 stipend for 24/7 advanced life support for Brandon, and being part of the person responsible for some of the proposed new ordinance for the ambulance, I'd be happy to stick around should the council acknowledge me or the mayor acknowledge me for questions regarding not only ordinance 6-7, which is the current ambulance for your ambulance ordinance, as well as the proposed number 598. Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, Brian, you want to start off?
Yeah, the issue I think tonight that we need to talk about is contained in section 678, paragraph 8, with the requirement of one paramedic and one EMT for runs if patient care and transport are occurring. I think everything else, at least in my conversations with MedStar, everything else is good. That's the only stumbling block we currently have.
Comments from the council?
So in reading our current ordinance, it appears to me that those are the same staffing requirements.
So, yeah,
So that's what we are operating under now.
yep. And MedStar has complied with that. 99 plus percent,
Yeah.
at least from my recollection.
Any other comments from the council? Have Mr. Major address the council here at this time, if you would.
J Major, 25968 476th
Hit
Street.
that button, Jane.
Sorry. That one.
No. Purple. There you go. Thank you.
All right. Jay Major, President, CEO of MedStar Paramedic Ambulance. So the first couple questions I have before I do any speaking and answering questions is, since 2007 to now, is there anything that sparked any reason for questioning the services in Sioux Falls and questioning the ordinance as it was written? Has there been, any reasoning for what we're doing today from any council member?
So if I understand your question, Jay, you want to know why we're changing the ordinance in its entirety?
Yes.
I'll answer that best I can. It was Brett and I who worked on it, and we felt there should be, I'll call it more due diligence on an ambulance services part than there was in the prior ordinance. More
Okay.
reporting.
I accept that. As we, and I know there was a vote 4-2.
Excuse me, Jade, I would
I'm
just
sorry.
interject that.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that it's predicated by us contributing $50,000 to the whole situation.
We're going to get into that. Yeah, we're going to get into that.
That's one of the main things that triggered us to look at the ambulance service and go from there. Just, go ahead, Jay.
Okay. And we're going to get into the monies part of it also. So that, I mean, that's not an issue. My question being, from 2007 to now, has there been any complaints of the services we provided? From anybody that you know of? That's just, it's an honest question.
I had the one that I asked you to come and address, which you
Yes.
did, and satisfactorily. So that's all I've had is in my 1 year is in this position.
Okay. So, give me about 5 minutes to kind of explain why I'm standing here in the first place, then I'm going to get into the questions that you have, including the $50,000. In 2000, I came into Brandon, and I worked from 2000 to 2007 to become the provider of the city. Frankly, I had given my house, which I did, to make that happen, because that was my passion for providing 911 services in a community where I was providing transfers for other folks. 2007, after a huge debate, the council at that time voted us in a license with a lot of skepticism from some folks in the city. Skepticism from folks in Sioux Falls. We moved in, and I not only have MedStar has not only provided what we said we would provide, but we have gone 1,000% above that. And sincerely, 1,000% above what we said we'd provide. We had and I was reading through this, in some of the recommendations, even from the city attorney's office, for the first and second ambulance, I'm required to have a paramedic and an EMT. Now, before we get into, I'm willing to do anything you want. Okay, I'm standing here today to say, I'm willing to do anything you want with this service for this community, if you pay for it. I can't pay for everything myself, which I've been doing a long time. I want to talk about the 50 before we get into some of the contractual things. And I knew that's why I was here, because, you know, $50,000 is a lot of money in the scheme of things, but it's not. For me to staff one ambulance 24/7, 365, just the wage for one paramedic and one EMT to staff that ambulance 27, just the wage. I'm not talking about taxes, I'm not talking about the vehicles, or the insurance, or where I put the vehicles. Just the wage is over $306,000 to provide one paramedic ambulance to this community. I get 50. We made, last year on 911, $187,000 on collections for the 911 service. It's not what we billed out, that's what we collected. Anybody want to guess where the rest of that money came from to provide services here? I'll throw it right at you. Me and my family provided that extra money to provide services here. Now, I want to talk about the 1 and 2 and 3 ambulances. Now, the last contract
I'm going
was...
to interject just
Go
a
ahead.
second. The comment was not made to debate. You asked the question,
Yes.
why we're here today. I was answering the question, which the council had a lot more vested interest when they start giving money to the question.
Understood.
No way am I debating whether $50,000 is a good deal or a bad deal.
No, understood. And I'm not debating that either. I'm not debating that either. But as a citizen of Brandon, and as somebody that all my kids go here, they're growing up here, I'm vested in this city. Let's talk about the things my ambulance service does in the city now. So we stand by the special events, the events that the city holds, including the high school events and so forth. Something that we started doing recently, within the last month or so, is because of all this hoopla of people getting stolen. There's white vans pull up and pull a kid in, or the trafficking of people. That's real stuff. I know it's real stuff because I'm in the business and I go into Sioux Falls and pick people up and take them to the morgue. It's real stuff. So we take our ambulance when it's not busy, and we drive that around the schools as schools get out, just to be part of a vigilant eye with a radio. Nobody knew we were doing that. We weren't bragging about anything, but that's part of what we're doing as a community. Now, as far as one ambulance versus 2 or 3, whatever the city thought that we needed to provide, our original agreement was we provided 1 paramedic ambulance. Anything after that was, if we had one available, we'd do it. We have provided up to 5 in this city at one time. And it's very not uncommon to provide 2 within an hour as things go. So as far as MedStar providing the services we say we're going to provide to the city, we've done it. Now, I want to get to the point that Brian brought up, because this is a sticking point with me. The last contract I signed, not the ordinance, and Brian explained to me the difference between a contract and ordinance, and I looked for it and I couldn't find it, but I'll find it. It said in there, at basic BLS level was the minimum standards that we had to provide. Remember that? Okay. Now, it's said that for the last year or 2. That's what it said. Twice since 2007 have I provided 2 EMTs on a truck, although I could have. I don't do it. That's not who I am. It's not what my service is about. Minnehaha County lowered their standards to a driver, one of you people, and not that you don't know your medicine, but one of you people, and an EMT fresh out of school. That's your county standards now. I fought it and lost. I didn't want them to lower standards to that. I fought and lost. I understand where the county, you want to ensure good service to your citizens. I get that. And if you were dealing with a bid or dealing with somebody from out of town that didn't care, I would also get that. I'm not that guy. So, as I was talking to Brian, Brian says, well, under ordinary circumstances, we case by case, if you had to do that and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm not doing that. And he says, well, why? And I says, because I got a reputation and I also pay insurance. Now, if the county ordinance says, or the city ordinance says I have to have a paramedic and an EMT on every call, I won't send 2 EMTs out. I'll call mutual aid. And guess what you get from mutual aid? You might get Paramedics Plus out of Sioux Falls, or you might get Garrettson with a 20-minute to the scene, to their station response, and you might get a driver and an EMT coming into Brandon, where I've got 2 EMTs experienced in 911 that could have had the guy to the hospital already. Now, I also want to tell you something else. I have a good relationship with Paramedics Plus in Sioux Falls. We've had that good relationship for over a year now. And I've worked with Paramedics Plus. And I said, listen, it's never happened yet. I said, out of the chance it might happen, if my ambulances, I don't care if everybody calls in sick one day, whatever it is, I don't have a paramedic on. I can't come in either. I said, I want to write an agreement with you that if we know it's an LS call, we dispatch right away. My EMTs get to the scene, load the patient, start heading towards where they're coming, and meet them en route. Our paramedic is going to be on board within 12 minutes of that call on the way to the hospital, rather than sitting here waiting for somebody to show up. So I have worked all these bugs out because this is my profession. It's what I do for a living. You guys count on me to do the right thing. That's why I am here. We count on you to do good insurance work. I couldn't do that. I think, Barb, you're in insurance too. I couldn't do that. No way could I do that. And I couldn't do your jobs. Obviously I'm not a banker, you know that. I know ambulance work. I know how to protect people. I know how to serve people. That's what I know how to do. The reason I want I don't care, you can make it 90% of the time. But the reason I want it in there that it is allowable, because I'm not taking a chance that one time where I have 2 EMTs on a call and I get sued
Don't you
for trying to help somebody.
Isn't that what we have now?
What's that?
The same situation? Isn't that what our ordinance says now?
Your ordinance does, but the contract I signed said BLS. Now, I didn't understand that the ordinance overrode a contract, but it does.
The contract's actually no longer valid, because I went and found it, because I couldn't find it in the packet either. And then Brian had emailed it to us, and when we had done that contract, it was on the recommendation from Brett and Chuck that we do that through the end of 2019. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball of getting a new contract. So right now, the only thing that's in place is our 12 or 13-year-old ordinance that says for every ambulance run, it shall be staffed with at least 1 paramedic and EMT.
And they have. Let me go down here just the last couple of months for you.
The contract is still valid, though,
For the minutes and the video, we all agreed 12 and 19.
what the contract states, medic removal list goes.
I didn't give notice.
I just want to say one thing. Mr. Major, like you brought up a point earlier. I haven't heard anything about your business. I mean, I'm sure you provide a wonderful service, and I thank you for that. But I think mainly what we're here today is just trying to find a language here for this. We were a paramedic and a, EMT. And this, I mean, we want what's best for our citizens, and this was what was the ordinance originally, I think. And then I didn't see this contract till today, that it said BLS. So I think that's where
Can I make it
we're
very
at now.
simple?
We can debate all that stuff, but
Sure, I'll make it very simple for you. What I
Yeah.
want to see in the ordinance is you can put, in Sioux Falls, everything is 90%. If you look at the Sioux Falls contract, everything that company has to do, they have to have a 90% approval on, which means 90% of the time they got to meet this standard. Now, they also have a committee that if they don't make their 90% and they're at 85%, they go back and look at it and say, oh, there was a train that got in the way, or this or that or the other thing. So they have a whole lot of things they can wipe out and make it 90% if they have to. I'm saying don't wipe anything out. I got to have a paramedic and EMT on a truck 90% of the time, period. And if I don't, I'll tell you. So what? But I don't have to tell you. The thing is you're still going to get your paramedic on the truck almost 100% of the time, twice since 2007. Twice. And guess what? That was a lot of times me when I was struggling with getting people to work.
But from my understanding, we can't compare Sioux Falls because we have a top-notch fire department that's our first responders in Sioux Falls. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but there are first responders that are there. So that ambulance service and this, I don't think that is a comparable statement because the 90%, it's a little bit different for them because they have a first responder within 3 to 5 minutes, I think it is.
We're on call,
right?
we're on scene within 3.5 to 4 minutes with paramedics. So maybe you didn't know that in the city of Brandon. Our average response time is under 4 minutes.
I saw that latest.
Yeah, it's under 4 minutes. So they may have great response times in Sioux Falls, which you do. But here our ambulance service gets there when their fire department gets there in Sioux Falls.
Well, I'm saying the 90% thing, I don't know the percentage-wise. I see why Sioux Falls might do it, might work for a larger city, and the fact that they have a full-time fire staff and first responders all the time. So, but I'm just saying that 90% thing is just is where I
You kind of got me confused a little bit because the smaller of the numbers, the lower the percentage should be because obviously out of 100 calls, they can have 10 of them that go bad. Out of 10 calls, I can only have 1 that goes bad.
So,
And the call numbers here are a lot less than they are in Sioux Falls. So they're doing 16,000 calls a year there, and I'm doing 320 here.
so maybe what we need to do is step back. The ordinance is the umbrella over everything. We are not writing the ordinance for you. We are writing the ordinance for any ambulance provider. So that is what we want.
Okay.
Maybe we need to be negotiating with you in the contract language. Maybe that's where we're wrong. Because I didn't realize about the contract either, Jay. So, that's my fault. So,
Well, and we did negotiate the contract language, and that's where the basic life support came in. And listen, I'm not putting the city down at all when I make this comment here. You will never have a service like MedStar in this town ever again if MedStar is not here. I have 6 ambulances, paramedic level, sitting in a garage in this city. We had just a couple of months ago, I can't name names obviously, but there was a horrible accident on the highway. The person's walking because of us. You will never, ever have the amount of medics and ambulances in this city. So the contract you are kind of writing it for us so that we can provide a service here and be part of this community. If you write it to where I can't obtain what you're doing, then I simply can't. I'm not going to be part of a system where I can't maintain the high level that there is. And I'm maintaining that high level right now. But I'm not going to take that 1/10 of 1% that something goes wrong. And it comes back on me because I'll be the first one thrown under the bus. I'm not going to be thrown under a bus. Now, listen, I'm going to go back one more time, and because I want to make this very simple for everybody. You have probably the best 911 service and time response in the state, if not in the country, right here in Brandon. If you've done your research, you'll find that cities this size don't have what you have. I've done my research. This is what I do for a living. The reason you have that is because I pour my private money, my private business, into it. So all I'm asking this commission to do is work with me a little bit so that we can both continue to grow together, make the best EMS services we can here, along with our fire department, along with our police department as we have, and keep growing this thing. And $50,000 to an individual is a lot of money. $50,000 for me doesn't pay the extra insurance I have for my 911 contract. So it is a help. It is a help. Everything's a help. But I pour my heart and soul into this thing. It's not just a business to me. It's not just an AMR or somebody coming in here to provide you a service. Because if they did, they wouldn't do what I'm doing. Nobody would. And that's just the way it is. And you and I talked about that. That's just the way it is. That's the facts. As I see them anyway, unless you guys have different facts. So all I'm asking for is the 90%. And I'm asking on Dr. Vasca for my medical director, where you name him on doing a lot of that work. I'm just asking to change the language there, Dr. Vasca or his, who represents him to take care of that stuff. You know, he's a cardiologist and he's a very busy man. He can have our medics or nurses or something do some of that stuff and we can hand it to him when it's done. But here you have Dr. Vasca getting way involved. He's got a clinic to run. He's got people to do heart work on.
For the county, doesn't Dr. Luther do it?
For the county, well, he does, and he also looks at everything from the city of Brandon. We send him everything. Dr. Vasca is my medical director.
Oh.
And in here, you're talking about my medical director.
Okay.
And I just want to be sure I don't overload him because, you know, back in 2007, he went out on a limb and did this so I could get started. And I just want to make sure he doesn't get thrown under a bus.
Jay, I just want to go back for a second, and as far as like trying to work together, I really do feel like we're trying to accomplish that. I mean, the old ordinance is pretty definitive where you really don't have flexibility or the ability to have some discretion in cases, because I think we've talked during some meetings where we do want, you know, in those really rare situations where you'd be able to grab somebody and go and not have to call for mutual aid. And that's why I really support the option that Lisa came up with. I didn't like okay, if this happens, then this, and then on the second call this happens, and then I didn't like that either. I thought it was way too restrictive, but I do really like her out for those extraordinary circumstances to just be written down and addressed with us, especially if it's a couple of times in the last decade. It's much more lenient than how it's written now. I guess for me, and I had a discussion with somebody at the state yesterday for over an hour, for us as the city leaders to put a rubber stamp on it's okay for 10% of the time to not have ALS, that's pretty tough for us to answer to those residents. Well, I'm sorry, you were in that 10% and you needed those cardiac medicines when you were suffering your heart attack. I mean, it's a huge jump from 1/4% to 10% and us putting our blessing on it. I know it's not 10%. I know it's not 5%. It's probably not even 1%. And that's why I guess I still go back and support that discretion that Lisa wrote in one of her options that makes it kind of a meet you halfway place.
And I hear what you're saying, but you also did hear when I talked at the beginning that if our EMTs picked up, we have ALS meeting us en route. So it's not like we're calling Garrettson to come in with a driver and an EMT who's taking that patient in without any ALS. So, you know, you got to have a little bit of faith in me, just a little bit. I've had my faith in the city since I've started, and I put my first front foot forward. I don't want you guys to legislate me out of my business in this town. I want to be able to provide services here and keep doing what we're doing. Today, I got 2 flight medics working, 2 critical care flight medics working today. I had 3 of them working the day there was 3 people that got hit on the highway. You know what that cost to have those people? So my point is, I get, but you don't get my business. You guys, you can talk to people that don't get my business. You don't get my business. The reason that Jay Fitch, remember Jay Fitch, the guy that did the study in Sioux Falls, if 90% wasn't a good way to do things, the guy that's quote unquote the best in the world at doing this stuff wouldn't have 90% on everything Rural Metro is doing. Everything is 90% according to Jay Fitch. Is it not? 90%. You don't know. You're the fire department. You're not the ambulance. All right, yeah. It's 90%. And nobody wants to be 90. I don't want my kid, because guess what? I live in the territory too. I don't want my kid not to have the best services they can get when they need it. If I could protect everybody all the time, 100%, without any clarity whatsoever, I'd do it. I cannot guarantee everybody here that that can be done.
I have a question. So your contract's at BLS, even though I know you always said you provide more than that, right? But, so you're under.
No, it said that
in the contract,
we
you
could,
provide
yes.
BLS, right?
BLS would be the least that you could provide.
Okay, or that was only expected, right? So that was kind of like your notion that for City of Brandon, I only have to do BLS, and then now you said tonight the ordinance says ALS, which is something different, right?
No. My notion was never that I'm going to do a BLS service.
But you signed the
If my
contract.
notion was that, then my last 3 months wouldn't have been 100% paramedic with 3 trucks on the road at the same time.
So, but you signed a contract saying that for the BLS, right? The minimum of BLS.
Minimum
Okay.
BLS.
That you
But I've never,
provide.
ever done the minimum, ma'am, ever.
Okay.
And I don't plan on doing it today. If you guys said I could be at 40%, I'd still be at 99.9%. But I think 90% is a fair percentage. And, okay, for 90% of the time, I can have mutual aid in the contract, correct? 90% of the time. I haven't called mutual aid in 6 months. And I've had a paramedic on every call. So does that not say that we do our best with our right foot and our left foot following each other and doing our best for this city? It absolutely does. And I'm passionate. And guess what? I know sometimes people don't like the way I talk or how I say things. I know I can be blunt and everything else. Dave has been working with me for 10 years and still doesn't have me where he needs me. As a police chief, we spend a lot of time together. My point being, guys, is I don't think I'm being... And let me tell you where you're wrong in your contract here, if I might point this out. For my equipment list, it has to be state certified, state equipment list, according to your contract. Well, you just lowered me down to Band-Aids and aspirin for my equipment list, because in there it says we have to meet the state standards for equipment. Now, I'm not going to meet that because it's in your ordinance. I didn't even have to say anything. You would have signed it and it would have been done, and I could have taken out $75,000 worth of equipment. Point being, guys, that's not who I am. If you read that, it says follow the state guidelines for equipment list. So we need to go back to the original equipment list, which you put in for, Brett, the REMS, the guidelines, for the equipment list, at a minimum, because we go above that, but at a minimum, and go with 90% of the time a paramedic on, 90% mutual aid, and MedStar will continue to provide the high quality we are, and we'll come up in front of you every 3 months and share that with you. If you find a problem, fix it. But nobody here said there was a problem. And that was my first question, is there a problem?
I don't think there's a problem. I think what we have set out would accomplish exactly what you're saying is happening. I guess I don't see the disconnect with it. I do think we need to go back to this contract. This wasn't in the packet or anything we had a chance to read. It was kind of one of those pieces of paper handed to us before a council meeting, and I will take responsibility for not asking for time to read it. I think that it should match our ordinance. I think that's wrong to have a contract that's opposite of what our ordinance is, so I'm going to ask that we update that with whatever we do decide. I don't know, I really struggle with that 10%. Jay, you know, we have an ordinance that says ALS, and when you came to us asking for the money, there was a lot of discussion about that was going to help continue to provide ALS service to the residents of Brandon. We're now providing that support or subsidy. I know it's not a ton, but now to go back and say, now we're providing a subsidy, but we're lowering the level of care to the residents, that's certainly going to be the perception to it. I know I'm not saying that that's going to happen.
It's 90% now, so how are you lowering anything? My
No.
percentage is 90%.
The ordinance says that ALS service is what our residents get. So if we say 90% of the time, ALS service is what the residents will get, that's going to be a perceived lowering of care level.
Well, let me put it this way to you then, so maybe you can understand if I personalize it with you. I've got 6 trucks sitting in my garage waiting to take 911 calls that I lose money on every day, okay? Now, in Sioux Falls, what they do, and they're better at it now, but this is what they really did a long time. Let's pretend in your office, Dana, that you have 4 people sitting in chairs in your office, and you're in the back. And those 4 people have to wait one by one for you to come in. And because that one day you had 4 people in there, now you're going to put 4 people in the back of your office, so if that ever happens again, you got 4 people sitting back there waiting to take care of those 4 so they're not sitting in your office, rather than sitting there for 2 hours at your office. Could you afford that?
Figure out how to afford it.
Okay, you couldn't. And you can say you'd figure it out, but you couldn't afford that. Because I'm a businessman and you're a businesswoman, and you know you couldn't do that for one time a month. I have to make this service work, guys, 24/7, 365. I don't get to go home on Christmas. I don't get to go home on holidays if I don't have workers. We are open for you and you and you and you and you and everybody out there. We're open for business, and we have provided an excellent service. And I'm not even sure why I'm standing here talking about it. Because I'm using most of my personal money to provide that service. And frankly, I'm not sure why I'm fighting. It's very simple as far as I'm concerned, is we write an ordinance. Put it this way, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to put this in perspective if I could. 1 ambulance is what I commit to the city. That ambulance is gone. Now, there's other 2 ambulances I sent out just recently. All I had was EMTs. If it was your loved ones on the street, would you want those 2 ambulances sitting in my shed with 4 emergency qualified EMTs? Or are you going to want to call somebody out of Sioux Falls, and if they're busy, get somebody from Garrettson with 1 ambulance to come and pick those people up? If you can answer honestly, yes, I would do that to my own family, then make your vote. But EMTs are 80% of what's in this state. They're 80% of what covers everybody in this state. And I've already told you my plan, if I send EMTs, to get medics on that patient as quick as possible. I've already given you that plan. I had that well before I came in here, before I knew this was going on. I'm taking care of my city. You're taking care of your city. I think we're mincing a little bit words here, but I honestly, I don't want to be legislated out of business, especially when I'm paying for it. And I really don't have any other than Dr. Vasca. When you look at that, you look at the medical direction side. I made a few notes. I just want to throw that out there. I'd like you to strengthen the equipment list part of it. Put it back up where it belongs. So it's ALS equipment list, same as REMSA and Sioux Falls.
In my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, council members, all of you, in my opinion, what I see here is your service has been exemplary, and I think we're all in agreement with that. You go above and beyond. I think, Mr. Major,
I'm listening.
I think you have to put yourself, as you have said multiple times, put yourself in your shoes. You have to put yourself in our shoes too. I think this is the direction the council is, they're trying to make an ordinance that if Jay Major is gone tomorrow, and Paul Lundberg Ambulance Service is doing this, and Paul Lundberg isn't delivering the quality of service that you are, it's hard as a city government, local government, you make rules and laws for the situation or the service that is provided. You can't make those rules and laws for one individual. And I can look you in the eye and say your ambulance service is exemplary. But I think how this has evolved, council, is trying to make an ordinance that if Jay Major isn't here and Paul Lundberg Ambulance Service is running it, that would be the, that he would have to follow those rules.
And I would say the same thing to Paul Lumberg's ambulance. You better be a good 90% of what you have to do in this ordinance.
Right.
I mean, it's not that this
That's what
ordinance
you're
is
saying.
bad. And you as a council, why would you bring somebody up that you questioned that they'd be at least 90%? And so that's where it falls back in your lap.
Mm-hmm.
I don't plan on going anywhere. I don't plan on it. But again, I don't want to be legislated out to where I'm taking even a 1% chance that I send the right people out on a call and even save a life and get sued because I break a rib doing CPR because I had 2 EMTs instead of a medic. It is just, there's too many things out in this world that we as business people, and I never used to be the business tycoon standing here talking, it always used to be passion. It's a little bit business now, and it has to be. And again, I don't know. I don't know if you have anything to say about our services and whether you've seen EMTs on a lot of calls. I mean, you're the ones that, you guys are out there all the time.
I think we can agree that service is not even remotely in question, Mr. Major. As I stated, correct me if I'm wrong, people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stating that the service is exemplary, and there is not one person on this council that is questioning the level of service.
So I understand.
And that's, bottom line, that's a high five to you.
Mr. Mayor, if MedStar wouldn't be here, you would be absolutely ecstatic if an EMT service would come in and provide a 24-hour, 365-day a week or a year deal. A basic service in this town is better than calling Sioux Falls or better than calling out here. I'm telling you that. See, we're looking at this thing in the eyes of, we want to make sure we have the best thing for the city, for the city of Brandon that we can, and I agree. I want that. If I could write the ordinance and I knew that there was no legal implications to anything, I'd say 100% on everything all the time because that's what I want for my family. I can't say that. I can't even say that for my own family. But people are getting 100%. They're getting damn near almost 200% a lot of times.
I agree with that statement that it is very difficult to provide 100% issue on a service that is, is relatively inexpensive. You can provide 100% service, but there comes a cost.
As I said, I'm willing to do anything for the cost. If the right money is there, you tell me what to do, I'm all in.
Yeah, I looked over the contract, and it did seem to be in conflict with the ordinance and has been in the contract. It does say BLS minimum. In the contract, it does say 90%, well, it says 10%. You can't exceed 10% as far as mutual aid calls in there. And I don't think that's ever been an issue. I personally, option 2, the words demonstrate extraordinary circumstances exist, such as numerous runs being dispatched at the same time. That would allow for a less than a paramedic and an EMT. And the problem that I guess I have with that is that seems to be fairly subjective. That is something that could expose the service, in a case where that wasn't met, and find yourself in court. I don't like that. I mean, I know our attorney wrote it. I don't like it because it's too, you know, what you might think is extraordinary, I might not. And I kind of liked, you know, looking through the contract. I guess I kind of liked it. I thought it made sense. It gave some wiggle room and still allowed for EMTs to be dispatched if others are messed up. I was working today at the airport. I was listening to the radio, and I was listening to all these vehicles sliding into the ditch from leaving the roadway. You know, none of them rolled. I think there were a couple of injury accidents around the city. But those things happen, and when they happen in, you know, rapid pace, and your resources are drained pretty quickly. I would still like to have the EMTs to be able to respond. And I think the wording in the contract made more sense to me than this hard and fast paramedic, EMT, and extraordinary circumstances would allow you to get away from that. I tend to agree with the 90% because it does give a little bit of latitude, and I think our service has probably demonstrated that, and I've seen it, where we've had serious medical calls and ambulances with paramedics have arrived on scene and provided service. I've never seen, I personally, I was never on a call where just EMT showed up. Personally, I was never on a call where Paramedics Plus or P Plus was mutual aided out. I do have a couple of questions. Vicki talked about the Sioux Falls Fire Department, excellent fire department, and they do have paramedics. And one question that I guess I would have is, are those paramedics now allowed to administer drugs?
Not yet.
The answer is no?
Not yet.
Not yet.
They're working on it.
But at this point, no.
One time, no.
Does the Sioux Falls Fire Department transport patients?
Not yet. No.
Something that they might be working on, but it, you know, so when you make that comparison, it falls a little bit short right now. That could change in the future, but
That was more towards regards to the 90%. So you say the city of Sioux Falls is 90%?
In their contract,
Sorry,
that,
it's 90%, that's what's written, that 90% of the time they would have, you said something about 90%. Like, that's just what I'm kind of worried about, the 90%, like how do you?
their contract is open for anybody to take a look at. I thought you guys had already done that when you wrote this one, but if you take a look at that, when Jay Fitch did his studies, 90% is his acceptable range of not meeting requirements, whether it be time requirements or whatever else he has in that contract. But their contract is open for discussion. The other thing, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to bring out, we're good neighbors, right? We're good neighbors to Sioux Falls, we're good neighbors to Garrettson, we're good neighbors to Valley Spring. We try to be good neighbors. Well, that doesn't end just with the cities. That's also part of my service. I'm a good neighbor too. So if Valley Springs calls and they've got a bad call there, we send a truck out to Valley Springs. Now, it takes me about 20 minutes to get another paramedic into Sioux Falls if one of my medics isn't living here, which I have 4 of them living in Brandon now because of the service. I don't want to stop being a good neighbor either, because that person in Valley Springs could be anybody here's family member, friend. You could be the one driving to Valley Springs and roll your car. So, you know, we're a good neighbor, but also Garrettson's a good neighbor because they'll come here and help. Sioux Falls is a good neighbor because they'll come in here and help if we need them. And that we can't wreck that. We can't wreck that. And I have no intention of wanting to wreck that, and I'm sure you don't either. But, and I agree with what Dave said there. I mean, there's...
I would guess, counsel, that following with what Dave said on the 90% situation, we will, based on past history, we will be sitting here in 1 year and we'll be looking at 321 calls with probably 1 or 2 instances that they aren't met with the high level that everybody wants to have. So I feel confident in that myself. I was also very excited to hear your plan. If something didn't work, that you have a plan with Paramedics Plus to meet them
Absolutely.
That's very good in my book to hear that situation, that plan, that you can meet halfway and your time is cut in half to get that person to the hospital.
Or ALS care if they need it. The other thing, guys, and this is a misnomer, 80% of the calls that we go on, that we send paramedics on, don't need a paramedic, okay? 5%, maybe 2% of the calls that we go on with paramedics, as that one that we all know about, are life-threatening, are things that we actually have to give paralyzation drugs, we have to give cardiac drugs, we have to give things for asthma. But the majority of calls, our paramedics go start an IV and put the monitor on and things. We basically do that and monitor them on the way into the hospital. So, the chances of us having not an EMT on scene is very dim to begin with. The chance of that call, when there is an EMT that might be on that call might be something that truly needs a paramedic, is very small. Now, again, that's not acceptable to me. That's why I have plans in place to handle that if it does happen. But thank you, Mr. Mayor, for recognizing that we do have plans and we do want to do what's best.
I have a question for Brian. So do we get to see those results? Like, I think, there's always a percentage, and I see both sides with the 90%. But when do you get the numbers? When do you present that to council in regards to if MedStar met the 90% of the calls? Or you know what I'm saying? We're talking about this percentage thing. When do we get those numbers? I mean, this is my first year, obviously.
It's included in the ordinance that MedStar will present quarterly to the council to include run response times. No, in the new ordinance.
It's in the new one.
In the new one.
I think we need to stop going back to the old ordinance and the old contract, because all those are going to be gone. So what?
In the new ordinance, MedStar, the licensee, will be required to come in front of the council, report any response time issues, any training sessions, or basically the activities of the company. Now, if for instance we look at it, Sioux Falls is a little bit different than us. They have REMSA, which is a full-time emergency medical service department within the city. And I think they review all of their runs, all of P+'s runs. And I think they probably give a monthly update. Pretty vague information. I think if I remember looking at the runs, it was priority 1 runs, how many response times were they in compliance. It was the ones I saw, they were 100%. Priority 2s, they might have been down about 98%, but then they've got a list of exemptions for P+. So yeah, it's a little different over there. We could have REMSA, our own brand in REMSA, but
So in our ordinance,
no, that's
in our ordinance, Chuck, we are requiring a quarterly report from MedStar to report, good. And I would guess,
Happily.
in a town like Brandon, South Dakota, a lot of this, just as it was before, it's self-reporting. If you show up and there's not a paramedic, guess what? I get a call.
Right. Well, and the call you got was, by the way, from a disgruntled employee.
I know that.
But
I know that.
yes.
I guess I'd just like to, I know Brett, you were asking to say something a little earlier, and as a person that has probably put in 100 hours on research on this topic, do you have anything else to add or questions that would help us make our...
Could I just finish with one thing
Yeah.
before I sit down? Just real quick. We were talking about the medical director, and as I was reading through this, it says things like supervise the clinical performance and training of all licensees, EMTs, paramedics, so forth. And I put directly or indirectly, which means that he can have somebody come and do it for him that's qualified. And that's pretty standard. And hopefully within the next year or so, Dr. Luther himself is going to be running through all of our medics and everybody in the county. And so that'll take care of the city at that time too. Because once the county does it, then, and the county's paying for it, that'll be another benefit, I think, from the county. And then the one below that says conduct monthly education training and so forth. We do that now, but Dr. Luther's not there, or Dr. Vasquez not there for that. So directly or indirectly, which means that we have somebody come in that's versed in whatever field that we're studying, whether it be cardiology or airway, whatever, and we still put those classes on, still get credit for them, but it's not our medical director coming and doing that on Saturday. So
For little kids, I want to do a 60 count. Would that be
you have them come out. We do that all the time, and see, that's some of the things that we do in the city. We also train the police department. We trained all the highway patrol in this area just recently. So we get, and we don't charge for that. We train your swimming pool people, the lifeguards every year, and that's all part of the 50. So we included that in there. So there's a lot of things that we do also that we're happy to do because it's what we enjoy doing. But that's really all I have.
Can I ask when that medical director, and I've been pointing to that,
Yeah.
on the proposed new ordinance.
Yep.
Well, it's on 9. 8 and 9, page 8 and 9.
Brett, I did recognize you.
Get down.
If we change too much of this, we start all over.
Yeah.
Be careful of that.
I'd have to talk with Lisa on what she would consider too much.
Because right now it's a few words.
Yeah.
I'll answer your question about what the changes for, but I want to remind everyone that the reason we're here tonight is for staffing, but we've gone all over the state on what we're doing this evening, and we're back to now medical director, and, this meeting was specific about staffing. If there were any changes or concerns with regards to this ambulance ordinance, it should have been done well before the second reading. So the ultimate goal of the proposed ambulance ordinance was designed to improve quality assurance practices, define medical director requirements, annual building audits, quarterly reports, and to improve emergency care for citizens. Plain and simple. So you asked what's wrong with the current ordinance. You kind of opened a can of worms. So again, there's been no changes to the staffing requirement. It's been in place since 2007. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we want someone in this community to provide advanced life support. But I do have a question. In regards to Ordinance 6-7-12, it says that the response time will be 90% within 60 seconds. Has anyone looked at that since 2007? And can you tell me those results last quarter? And my guess is probably no. I'll go on. There's also supposed to be a quality assurance designee, and that person's supposed to meet quarterly. 6-7-18. That's been in there since 2007. What's this past quarterly statement regarding that quality assurance? There isn't one. I'll keep going. How about the ambulance service rates in 6-7-21? What do we have on that? Don't have it. Okay. And the last thing, 6-7-23. I'm hot now. We have an ambulance application. Do we have that? And my guess is probably not. That's the point. The point is we're trying to take something and make it better. There's nothing to do about your service. There's nothing to do about the police service. We have excellent EMS service. We have excellent ALS service.
Sir,
this is about
you're saying
taking.
this to this crew,
No,
but you were part of the. You were part of this crew over here
Hold it.
when you were doing all
Yeah,
that.
We're not gonna, Brett,
So
we're not
point
gonna
being
debate.
Is, yeah, I get it. The
We're
point
not
being
gonna
is
go
it's
out in
good.
public and debate
so
this.
that's why we need to make this change. Any other questions?
Other council member comments?
Yes.
Thank you.
So you're saying that you're making this change to simplify it, Brett? Is that correct? Your point was that you're trying to simplify the ordinance.
I'm trying to improve the current ordinance that's in place. I wouldn't say it's simplifying it whatsoever.
Okay? There's less numbers, because you read up to 23, and now we're only at like 18, so seems more simple.
I would just, it's not
Better.
necessarily to simplify it, it's to
Okay.
improve it. Yep.
More due diligence.
Okay. I would also say that we made a 911 call probably 12 or 13 years ago. The Brandon Volunteer Fire Department responded. It was fantastic. And we sat and waited for 40 minutes for somebody from Sioux Falls to come retrieve the hurt person and take them into Sioux Falls. I could never understand when he wanted to provide 3-4 minute response times why anybody would have a problem with that. It seemed a little ridiculous, whether it's a paramedic, an EMT, whatever it is that would come provide service to somebody and get them to a hospital. I think you're doing a wonderful job. I really do. And it appears as though the most important thing is to get somebody to a hospital for care. Whether that's with an EMT or a driver or a drone, I don't care what takes them, right? Getting them to a hospital is the most important thing. So if we're going to write a legislation that says he can't make a call if he's not properly staffed, we got to call somebody else. Now we're at 40 minutes. Seems ridiculous to me that we would stop that progress from happening. And if he wants to change a couple of words essentially to the ordinance, because that's sort of what I'm seeing, that seems like it would make sense to me. That's my 2 cents.
Anyone else?
So essentially, to boil it down, it appears that we're in agreement other than 90% or the paragraph that Lisa wrote. Is that what we're at? That's where we're
That
at.
would be
That's
my
basically it. Okay.
What we're supposed to be discussing tonight.
Yeah, okay. So some people think it's too subjective, some people think 90% isn't enough. So that's kind of where we're at, just so I'm clear.
I'm good with the 90%. I mean, if we're taking a poll.
Poll had not been presented yet, but thank you.
I'm just offering it up.
Gotcha. I would concur with that. I, too, am all right with the 90% language in the contract, personally.
So I have a question, is there some kind of compromise, or is there something with the 90% if on a quarterly basis, if that's not met, like, how does that work? It's struck me as a question for you, since you kind of.
I'm going to compromise with the 90% to get the ordinance passed. That's where I stand.
Is there anything in the?
You know, if I can interject, I think if, you know, we're going to be on this council for a while, some of us, and if our ambulance service wasn't living up to the contract and the 90%, that would be discussion at that time. You know, it's not like we put this out and let it go and forget it. We're, you know, the quarterly reporting keeps us in touch of where that service is at, what kind of response times they're having, what kind of response with personnel that they're having, and if we run into a problem, then we throw them under the bus. And it's been my experience that,
Which leads into the point that I just made. When crap goes south, we as a we hear it. Yeah, I mean, my phone's ringing when it goes south, and that's, I think, a summary of your point right there, right? Am I correct in
yeah,
that?
shorter, I talk longer than you.
So I'm just gonna say I can't support the 90%, guys. I mean, if I'm the only one, then that's okay. But like Brett mentioned, we meant to make this better and improve our level of care. And if we are writing this for any ambulance service, I mean, we're a city of 3 miles by 4 miles. And if we have to write this for the next ambulance service in Brandon, I think the only benchmark we can have is that we want ALS service provided. And if there's extraordinary circumstances to that, but to just go from our benchmark for the last 13 years has been one and only thing, ALS service, and now we're okay 10% of the time. Again, we're accountable to the citizens, and that's where I have the problem with it. I don't think it's going to be 10% of the time that we don't get it, but being the people that are accountable to the citizens and now subsidizing the service, I don't think we can lower our expectations of care. And in fact, Lisa's option makes it more flexible for that discretion.
Mr. Mayor, can I speak one more time?
He kind of knocked me off my track of thought.
Sorry.
Let me gather.
If you look at historically, it seems as though we've had a contract in place that doesn't match the ordinance that we had written. So to say that we're lowering the care is not really true, because they've been operating under a contract that doesn't match an ordinance that was in place. So it actually seems like 90% would actually be improving the care.
Well, the contract was just 10 months ago, and it wasn't in the packet for any of us to review. So, and I take responsibility for, I should have, when it was just handed to me before a council meeting, I should have said, I'm not going forward with this because I haven't even looked at it. I just went off of the recommendation, which I still plan to do that.
I don't think, what I was going to say is, I don't think that the ordinance itself, it may clarify some things, it may give us a little bit better oversight on some things. I don't think the ordinance itself necessarily improves the quality of care that we've gotten in this town. Because I've been out there on the street, I've seen it, and the quality of care that we've received from this ambulance service is exemplary. Yeah, and there are people that are walking around talking today that would have been in the ground had we not had this level of ambulance service. And I don't know, I'm not even going to ask Jay what his age is. I've known him for a long time, and I know how old I am. And eventually, this gentleman's going to retire, and maybe someone will buy the ambulance service, and maybe they'll stay with us in town, or this ambulance service could be sold at that point and merged with someone else, and they may decide that it's not profitable, because that's what a lot of the ambulance services are in this business for, is to make a profit. And it may not be profitable for them to have that service here, and then we're going to see a reduction in the quality of care. I'm talking about the here and now and what we have and what we want to try to maintain. I don't think that the 90% is unreasonable, because I don't think that that's going to be an issue. I think that we're still going to get the same level of response that we've had in the last, well, the 11 years, 12 years, coming up on 12 years that I've been here. And I don't see it changing. Getting worse or getting better. I don't know if it can get much better.
I just want to notate again, and Brett can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we sat down with Brian to look at this, we weren't trying to say that the service was bad. It was there. We were sitting down to redo the definitions. We wanted more quality control definitions in there. We wanted more medical director duties in there. It was vague. We wanted to update the accurate response time. We wanted to lay out more detailed licensees' duties. And we also wanted to make sure that from this point going forward, current staff and staff to come, we're going to be held accountable to make sure that things are being followed. So it had nothing to do with if it's good service or not. It was cleaning up an ordinance that was vague, didn't have good definitions, the things that I've stated. So that's...
I agree 100% with what you said about everything, that you guys deserve to know all that stuff. I'm going to make one more comment. I'm going to sit down because I think we've taken this thing to death. But I've heard the 50K come up more than once, and there's a difference, Dana, of putting things down on a piece of paper and going out there and doing it in real life. You're in love with the paper. I'm in love with real life. Now, what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to give you back the 50, and I'm willing to make it into an EMT service, and that will cut my insurance by $35,000 a year.
Jay, I think you might want to just step
No, I'm not sitting down because I want to make sure that she understands that it's not about paper. It's about life. And we've been providing that service of life since I've been here. And you know that because you and I sat down and talked about it in your office.
I think that you provide excellent service. But I did not appreciate this whole process because you put Brian in the middle. We specifically asked you to come earlier to talk about this. And it didn't have to get to this point, Jay. It's kind of like Congress. You know, now we're battling button heads. It didn't have to be that way. So next time we have an issue, let's get in here and talk to us about it and don't put Brian in the middle. I felt very uncomfortable about that.
No, I just need to clear it up, I do, because I had a call in Brandon during that meeting. Brian knows that. You could have postponed it. You could have held it a week or 2 weeks later. But I couldn't come because I was in the ambulance.
Any further questions from council? Direction? Moving forward.
We're going to vote on it at the next meeting, right?
Right.
It's on the
But-
agenda.
For the next council meeting.
And,
And then would that be tomorrow for the briefing, right?
right. So we'll hash it out again then and get a vote. Is that what you're telling me?
That's what I'd like to proceed to do.
Yeah. One way or the other, I don't know.
Direction on 90%.
That's what I was trying to go.
What would have to be changed?
How would Lisa write that? That's why I would like to see what Lisa would write.
We'd be looking at amending 678, paragraph 8.
Well, you would have to add 90% of the time stamp, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd have to add some language referring to the 90% of runs be staffers, something along that line.
Since this is the second reading, though, does a counselor have to amend it?
No,
Why not?
you can, we haven't in the past, it's just, here's the second draft.
I watch a lot of,
We're a little different than Sioux Falls.
well, I watch a lot of those, and usually the counselors have to amend it and put it.
I don't want anything to do with right now.
Just a reminder, our council advised us against percentages.
Oh, Lisa?
Yeah.
That's why I would like to see what Lisa would say. Oh, she'd write that.
I'll talk to her first thing in the morning.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion to second adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much.